we live? All right. Well, hello, everybody. I want to thank you all for being here in person, or those of you watching us online this evening. We will call the special open session meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Board, I have a motion to approve the agenda for November 6, 2025 as presented.
Second.
Director Pushkar, seconded by Director Ponder. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. The motion passes. We have one other vote that's happening tonight. It has to do with panel purchases. And after this, we'll go right to a conversation regarding the facility master plan. So board, I have a motion to approve the Marco/33 interactive panel purchases as presented.
So moved. Second.
Director Pushkar, seconded by Director Ponder. Is there any information we need to be informed about?
No, we appreciate the board putting this on the agenda today. This allowed us to get 3 free panels. We have to take delivery by the end of this year, and with the holidays approaching, both Thanksgiving and Christmas, there was some thought that if we could bring it earlier, we would know that we would get it in before the end of the year to be order purchased and on-site, and therefore get 3 free ones. So we appreciate the board allowing us to do that this evening.
I appreciate that. Thank you for you and your team looking ahead, potentially save the district $6,000, and by having it voted on today versus November 20th.
That would be all Mr. Gowan and Miss St. John.
So thank you to Mr. Gowan and Ms. St. John. Board, any conversation? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Motion passes. And I think now we just go into the next.
Need to adjourn.
We need to adjourn the. Board have a motion to adjourn the special open session part of our meeting tonight.
So moved. Second.
Director Pushkar, followed by Director Ponder. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Motion passes. And so now we begin a work session. And so we have a presentation by Howell and Miller, and that's where we will begin. All right, thank you.
Good evening, Board. This evening we're pleased to join you to facilitate an important discussion on district infrastructure priorities. As our district continues to evolve, it's essential that our physical assets align with our educational goals, our safety standards, and our long-term strategic priorities. Our objective this evening is really to engage with you in a focused discussion that's in alignment with our district's strategic plan by reviewing facility conditions, projected enrollment, and emerging educational and operational needs for the purpose of establishing priorities and next steps for facility investments that support student success and educational community's expectations. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our district architects, Howell and Miller. They will be leading much of tonight's discussion. They do have a new team member with them this evening, so they'll introduce him here in a second. Following introductions, I'll review our agenda, the district's master planning timeline, before I turn it over to Howell and Miller for the remaining discussion. So, I know the board knows Megan and Justin, and we have John here that's with us this evening. So John, if you want to introduce yourself.
Good evening, John Wayne, Howell Miller Architects, architect, client leader with Howell Miller Architects. Nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you.
Everybody knows Megan and Justin. So this evening, as we have a clicker. Yep.
You want to go to the next slide?
Yes. Yep, agenda here. So the agenda, we've gotten through introductions. We'll talk about the district master planning timeline here. Talk about planning priorities, and then we'll do a facilities needs overview, and then we'll talk about the implementation options. So as we always like to do, even when I give our quarterly construction update, I always want to walk the board on the journey that we've been through to get us to the point that we're having this discussion here today. So the board awarded Hollis & Miller the facility master planning contract back in February of 2025. Following that, we surveyed district staff regarding facility master planning, condition assessments, things that they see from their purview and things that affect their daily work. We provided a progress update at the September 18th Board of Education meeting. And then shortly, I believe the next day, we surveyed the board in terms of priorities as well as district leadership. And you'll hear a little bit about that, the survey results here this evening. And then strategically, obviously when we talk about facility master planning, the other component is the board needs to be have the information in terms of where the district sits from a debt service management standpoint. So the board heard from Piper Sandler at the October 16th Board of Education meeting in terms of debt service management and menu of options that they provided to the board. And then we're here today on the 6th of November, and we're going to have the board work session to just really discuss priorities. And the goal here, obviously, we're not asking for a vote. It's just really a discussion in terms of making sure the work that's taken place aligns with what the board's priorities and vision would be in alignment with the strategic plan and other district initiatives. So with that, I will turn it over to the Hollis & Miller team.
Thank you, So we just wanted to do a brief recap of what we've been hired to do. So we were hired to do a 5-step process. Step 1 was the game plan. So that's where we met with district leadership and we put a game plan together about what we wanted to accomplish and the timeline that we wanted to accomplish it in. Step 2 was data collection. So last spring we came out over spring break. I think we came out in 2 or 3 different groups. We had several people come in, tour all the buildings. And what we did during the data collection is we looked at the buildings through the lens of an architect and engineers, right? So we did our kind of facility assessment where we walked the buildings, we looked at doors, walls, roofs. We had civil engineers look at our grounds, so for the parking areas, the grounds themselves, the grass areas. And then we had our MEP engineers look at those systems. So we took all of that data, we gathered that, and you'll see some of the results of that assessment later tonight. A few weeks ago, we sent out some surveys in late September, and then a few weeks ago, we asked the district leadership to join us in a work session about planning priorities, which we're going to go over with you tonight, so we came up with 7 of those. Then we're going to go over the exploring of the options. That's where we take all the things that we found and start to put dollars to it. And then the next step will be in December, January, and that will be adopting the plan. So with that, we'll jump right into the planning priorities. And so we can have this as an open discussion as we go one by one, or there will be a slide at the end that has all 7 of the priorities that we came up with. So I'll kind of leave it up to you guys to interact with us as you see fit. We can do it live in the moment, or we can wait till the final sheet. But what we had done is we took those survey results, we took the leadership team meeting that we had, that work session that I talked about, and the strategic plan. We wove all of those together, and we came up with 7 different planning priorities. These priorities are the ones that we as a collective group have felt kind of rise to the top, right? They answer the call of the bell that the district has already stated, not only in the survey responses, but also in the strategic plan. And then we have tied back all of the stuff that we found during the facility assessments to one of these priorities. And so that was a guiding light for us to make some of the decisions that we did as we show you some of the numbers that came through in the exploring of the options. So I'll jump right in. And number 1 was safe and secure facilities and play spaces. And the comment that we brought there was a continuous improvement mindset will drive safety and security efforts across the district. Buildings should provide physical and emotionally safe learning environments for students, staff, and visitors. For an example, daily access, weather-related or intruder events. This mindset extends beyond the building itself to include playground areas, appropriately closed school sites, pedestrian pathways, and parking areas. Moving on to number 2. That was high-quality infrastructure and long-term investment in facilities. And our comment there was modern energy-efficient systems for our HVAC, plumbing, roofing, etc., that building envelope. will be prioritized to support comfortable functional learning environments and to reduce long-term operational costs. Decisions will be made with a long-term mindset, allowing for flexibility and continued value over time. A focus on ongoing maintenance of existing facilities will help extend the life of our buildings and ensure that they continue to meet the evolving needs of the students and the staff. Number 3, equitable learning environments through staffing and support. So spaces and programs should be should equitably support staff, students of all ages and learning abilities, early childhood, K-12, and alternative education, ensuring that no matter what level of learner, vibrant supporting learning environments are thoroughly integrated to the best support successful learning. The district follows DESE guidance for support and teacher-student ratios and staff planning, and this is as follows. K through 2, our desired is a 17-to-1, so 17 students to 1 staff, and the maximum DESE is 21-to-5, and then we currently use a 21-to-1 ratio. Grades 3 through 4 is the desired ratio would be a 20-to-1. The maximum by DESE is 27-to-1, and currently we use a 24-to-1. Grades 5 through 6, the desired is 22 students to 1. The maximum is 30-to-1, and we currently use that 30-to-1 ratio. Grades 7 through 12, the desired is 25-to-1, maximum is 33-to-1, and we currently use a ratio of 29-to-1. So that's what we use to start to look at what we'll see as the building occupancy, and we start to go through those. On number 4, it is inclusive environments that support the whole child. So inclusive spaces will be designed to support students of all physical, cognitive, and emotional abilities, ensuring equitable access to learning and play environments. Facilities will integrate areas of respite, self-regulation, and restorative practices, promoting mental well-being and supporting the whole child beyond the classroom. This comprehensive approach fosters a welcoming environment where every student can feel safe, supported, and able to thrive. Number 5, student-centered hands-on learning connected to the real world. By incorporating specialized hands-on learning spaces and programs that encourage student-led experimentation, the district will foster real-world learning opportunities through strong community and industry partnerships, connecting students with experts and supporting deeper engagement within district facilities. Priority number 6, investing in welcoming modern spaces for a lasting impact. Recognizing the impact of the environment on perception and learning, the district will prioritize providing modern learning environments that support current student and teacher needs through up-to-date infrastructure, aesthetics, and relevant tools aligned with the Francis Howell School District community. Emphasis will also be placed on realizing the long-term value of high-quality facilities through thoughtful renovations and strategic repurposing to best serve students and staff. And then finally, our last planning priority is preparing students with future-ready skills through integrated technology. Learning spaces and programs will support future-ready skills like problem solving, critical thinking, and social emotional development. Technology will be integrated thoughtfully, providing students with current devices and programs through a consistent strategy that allows for updates and broad access within budget. And so as we took that data that we received through the surveys and through our work session and the strategic plan, those were the 7 planning priorities that we have come up with today. So we wanted to take a moment and let you guys see if we missed anything, hear your feedback if you have any, if you would like us to wordsmith some of these, just kind of open it up to you guys to see what you think and if we were on the mark.
And one thing to keep in mind there is, obviously we have the strategic plan that guides overall district board progress. This is really focused on facility improvements. So the facility master plan is really focused on your physical assets. So from that standpoint, some of these are really geared towards that versus kind of bigger picture curriculum, things like that.
Any questions, board, so far? Okay.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, well, if there's no questions on that, we are going to step back. If you guys remember, we visited a little bit in September. We also provided you with this quite long report, which I'm sure you guys have all, read every single word in that 100-page report. So one thing we talked a little bit about in September was building capacity and also the projections that Piper Sanders brought out. So as we talked about in those planning priorities, Justin mentioned that the numbers we used, those were kind of those midpoints. So if you remember on planning priority 3, we talked about the desired and then that maximum that's based on DESE guidance. So from a capacity study standpoint, we talked about there's different ways to assess that to make sure that we're accounting for specialty programs, for bubbles in enrollment. Unfortunately, 25 kids in every single grade level doesn't work out perfectly, so we've got to give some flexibility in there. So those numbers that we referenced in planning priority 3 is kind of that midpoint. So if we think about, there is some buffer in there. So we don't want to be overly conservative and have a building that's inefficient, but we also gotta give us some flexibility in there. So we went back, we did get some questions and feedback, I think, from some community members, and I know there was some discussion in the district after that, so we did want to revisit this just very briefly to make sure we all feel good about the data we shared and how we're talking about applying that moving forward. Because I know that raised some questions, especially as we started to talk about buildings being over capacity or under capacity. So just a quick refresher on what we shared in September. So this is a frame of reference for district-wide K through 12 specifically. Early childhood and alternative programs are a little bit more nuanced. So those are not in the discussion point for today. That's something that we could discuss at a later date. But as we look at this, as a reminder, the yellow categories are those that are identified as under 75% utilized. The light red is in that 90 to 100%, that kind of approaching capacity, and then those darker red are those that are over 100%. And as a reminder, typically we see the target or ideal capacity being in that 75 to 90% utilization from both an educational experience and operational efficiency standpoint. But again, there's a lot of variables that play into that. So this is kind of that first data pass that then needs to go back and be validated to make sure how we're using buildings truly is representative of this data. So that's one of the things that we have done and gone back and looked at since September to make sure we're comfortable with these recommendations. So to zoom in a little bit further here, when we talked in September, we talked about 4 buildings that were showing as either currently or in future projections going under that 75% capacity. The good news is there's only one building that even shows under 75% today. That is Francis Howell Middle, and it's 74.37. So again, those are kind of just general guidelines. And as we look out, that actually corrects itself over the next 10 years and shows a little bit of growth into kind of that ideal standpoint. And then the other buildings that are showing under capacity are not until 5 to 10 years out. There are a couple that drop off quite a bit in 10 years. So right now at this point, feels like those are still operating very well. Educationally, they're really working well. So our recommendation at this point for these buildings is really just to monitor and reevaluate in 3 to 5 years. As we go out with projections, we know they get more accurate. They're as good as the data we have now. So this is one just to continue to monitor to make sure that we're doing things that we need to do educationally and operationally here, but feel pretty good about where those sit right now, which is great news. Similarly, with the buildings that are showing approaching capacity, we do have 4 that are currently showing in that 90 to 100% in various degrees. 2 of those correct themselves in that 5 to 10 years, and then a couple other ones start to come on board there. But again, talking with the district, talking with staff and administration of those buildings, feel like they still have a little bit of flexibility in space. They're not, they're not able to do what they need to do to support kids and staff. So we feel like, again, this is one that we want to monitor and reevaluate in that 3 to 5 years to see, number one, if projections are correct. Things have changed a lot. People are moving, more transient. So this is something that can definitely be reevaluated at that point, but nothing in terms of a recommendation for any action in terms of moving kiddos or anything there at this point. And then finally, those buildings that we're showing, those 3 buildings that we're showing over capacity, and they were again right on that threshold, 102%.
Again, 2 of those start to correct themselves over time. 1 does continue to trend upward, but through some additional conversations there, do feel like, again, educationally, they're able to do what they need to do. So right now, we don't have any recommendations for making any changes based on this. So again, that's the thing of yearly, definitely in that 3 to 5 year range. Make sure we're continuing to reevaluate that and make sure, as programs change, additional resources are needed, that doesn't push that over that threshold, that we're not able to support kids in the right way. So good news there is, I know sometimes when you just see these colors and numbers, that can be a little concerning, but we do feel like buildings are in a good place now to give you some flexibility long-term.
Board, also, just to add, there is an internal group that looks at enrollment data annually. We meet twice a year and review. It's a member team of about 6 to 7 individuals, key leaders in the district that review trends, enrollment numbers. We also do review project permits that are coming up in the county. And so while we're recommending to reevaluate in a 3 to 5 year, know that annually there's work that's takes place to review pockets where we see spikes in class sections.
Okay, before we move on to the next section, any questions or anything regarding the capacity?
I just have a question about like Daniel Boone, for example. That's pretty heavily over capacity, it looks like, already, and then it just looks like it's gonna get worse. So how, if you've got a building capacity of 408 and we're looking at 484, like that seems super substantial. So how are we feeling about, that as well? Like that's absorbable still?
I think at this time, I believe it's Lou, maybe you can share some additional feedback here in terms of, I don't believe the building has shared that they feel like they don't have enough space currently. So we do believe there is some additional capacity. And again, this is looking again at that midpoint. So it also really depends on staffing ratios as well. If you are closer to the maximum in terms of classrooms, that actually increases the capacity. So realistically, there is some buffer in those numbers to support that.
So we could increase class sizes, worst case scenario, and still.
Correct, because if you look at the planning priorities, so for example, for elementary school, if we look at, let's say 3rd to 4th grade, we are using in that capacity study 1 to 24 for classroom sizes, whereas DESE guidance is up to 27. When you get to 5th grade, DESE guidance is a maximum up to 30 in there. So there is additional space in there. I would say this is conservative to give you that when you do have those bubbles, some additional capacity in there.
And then as part of this, I know this is just facilities focused, but presumably part of this broader discussion then has to do with teachers and TAs or, whatever we need to do to support classroom, because we already, I feel like, have a struggle for our teachers maintaining classrooms with a variety of students, and then to just be like, we can fit some more kids in there feels risky and not great, so.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I think if you look at some of the work that the board has previously approved, Henderson and Fairmount, a lot of that was to really support high-need students in terms of how those spaces are being utilized. And so we do continue to look at that annually. And specific to like Daniel Boone, we did take the numbers, at least the ones that were showing as overcapacity, and we engaged with those building leaders and, hey, is what we're seeing here accurate? Said, yeah, for the most part. However, they do have flexibility within classrooms and even a couple of open classrooms at a couple of those buildings to be able to accommodate needs.
Yeah, I know we've got lots of financial, Amy's drowning in it over here, I know, but I know we've got lots of big financial decisions that are looming, and so I just want to make sure that while we're having this conversation about facilities management and isolation, we've got early childhood issues that we're talking about. We've got a lot of really big, heavy decisions that are looming, I think, for how we use the money that we have, and as that money is continuing to dwindle and be threatened even further, these are going to be really hard conversations, and I just want to make sure that we're approaching our communications to the public with that whole picture so they understand the ECC decision isn't going to be made in isolation, the facilities decision isn't going to, and that we are looking at all of that, because I think it's easy for that whole story to get lost to people who aren't in all of this, day to day.
Certainly understand.
Yeah, I would just add that, if you go back and look historically at Daniel Boone, they've even had class above that 484 number. We did some, deep past practice, and that was before some of that most recent expansion happened, the additional cafeteria, things along those lines. I think probably the biggest challenge is space is utilized differently today. And so as we continue to evaluate enrollment on a year-to-year basis, and as we evaluate staffing on a year-to-year basis at each individual building, we'll be reflective in making some of those decisions as we move forward.
Has any thought been gone into the growing amount of apartment complexes going into this area? I mean, this is this way right now, but we've all noticed car washes and apartment complexes, they're everywhere. Has anything thought gone into what might happen if this continues?
Yeah.
I mean, this is only going to get worse if that's the case.
I think the demo advisors covered that at the September update that we provided with the board. And while we're seeing growth in terms of construction that's taken place, the birth rate continues to decline. So while those apartment complexes are going up, it doesn't necessarily equate to more kids.
Our team also, as an apartment complex comes online or we see one about to be developed, we try to look at what the potential rent for each one of those apartments is. And we find a project that's very similar in scope, design, and cost in the area. And we're able to kind of circularly wrap that apartment complex and see how many kids we're drawing out of that. We use that kind of a method in some of our year-to-year enrollment projections. And then obviously the work that Howell Miller did with their partner and wanting to do something like that every 5 years to continue to make sure we're online there. Certainly we think we'll be on top of it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And remind me again, how often, Mark, do you review those kind of numbers for bubbles, I'll call it, like she mentioned?
Yeah, I would say to Saloom, myself, some other members of a team, we meet annually. So we do this 2-3 times a year. We look at kind of what projected counts are at the very beginning of October is when in one year we start projecting for the following year based upon those October counts that are drawn out by Zach Brady, one of our team members. And then as we approach the year, as we're ending the year, we start to reevaluate whether those numbers are accurate. And then Mr. Brady and Ms. Simpkins work together all summer long. I think he probably sends her projections weekly as kids are moving out, kids are moving in, and then she's better able to align to make sure that what she projected for staffing was still current and correct.
Okay, great. I was just curious as to how nimble we were in case there was a huge influx in a particular area for whatever reason. Okay, thank you.
And again, with that, we look at things annually, and I know at least a couple of buildings this year, we did have to go in, and again, it's how the spaces are being utilized. I know our team had to go in and make a couple of modifications within a couple of our elementary schools to accommodate that increase.
Thank you.
Well, with that, we're going to jump into a review of the facility needs holistically. So before we do that, I think we've talked a little bit tonight about this facility master plan being very facility-centric. That being said, we don't want to lose sight of the overarching goals of the district. So obviously, you guys have done a lot of work on your newest strategic plan. So we want to use that as the foundation for everything we're doing. Again, we don't want to work in silos to make sure that we are looking at things across the district and making smart choices both financially and educationally. So we spent some time going through that. As we talked about earlier, we did send out a survey to all of district staff and administration this past spring. and we shared a little bit of this data at the last board meeting. And the really cool thing is actually as we go through this process and we funnel all this data is everything is aligning pretty well as we talk about strategic plan, the input we got from district staff and administration in the spring. We also, as you see up there, we shared some high-level themes from this facility assessment report, and then most recently that planning priority. So again, as we start kind of in that larger funnel of big picture information, as we move through this, it's not a good thing if things are not aligning and pointing in different directions, but as we work through the feedback that we got on those planning priorities, it was really cool to see that it was supporting what staff said, it was supporting what the district strategic plan said. So that tells us that we are in really good alignment here, and that allows us to kind of start to put that lens on all the project and more specific needs to understand and help you guys work through what priorities might look like moving forward. So data is always good, and how we apply that is where we kind of move forward from. So just wanted to take a quick minute to remind us of all the information that's kind of leading to what we're going to share tonight, because we're going to talk about a lot of numbers, and I know that starts to be a lot of data as well. So we're going to, again, like I mentioned, we're going to start big picture. So we're going to try and kind of talk from macro to micro to work our way through what we found in this really long report. So not to say it's simple, but we have tried to cull this down into, we're going to call them buckets for the matter of discussion tonight, tried to cull this down into 3 larger buckets to start to talk through needs across the district. So as you see up here, those 3 buckets are ongoing maintenance projects, number 2, safety and security projects, and then learning environment improvements. So as you can see off to the right, it's important again to go back to what we've heard to make sure we're aligned. So we do want to go through and make sure that that is hitting at least one, if not multiple, of those planning priorities, as well as some of your pillars within the strategic plan. So we'll go through those here each in a second, but that's kind of how we started to look at this to create a needs or project list, since it does need to kind of transfer into a tangible project from a facility improvement standpoint. So starting off with those ongoing maintenance projects, again, these align with planning priorities 1, 2, 3, and 6, and strategic plan pillar number 3. And these are really focused on exterior site. What happens when we get to the building? How do we get in there safely? The exterior of these buildings and facilities, and those interior improvements. So we've further broken these down into those exterior improvements, exterior envelope or facade, which is really the roof, brick, walls, doors, windows, kind of those things, that we got to make sure they don't leak, so that we are protecting those assets that we have and making sure, just like your home or your car, over time you've got to update and take care of those so that you don't have to deal with larger repairs down the road. And then that third one is those systems improvements. So HVAC, mechanical, heating, cooling, plumbing, electrical, lighting. Again, all those things that over time, they have a life cycle on them and need to be replaced. So the more that we can get ahead of that and plan proactively helps avoid some of those last minute repairs or things that sometimes cost more money. But if we can stay ahead of that, can long term help save some dollars there. With that second one, safety and security projects, obviously in the last bond and through capital improvements, the district has done a lot of great work here. So this list is really about continued improvement. So, safety, security, both emotional, physical, always continues to change, whether as more technologies and we know more about how to get ahead of those things. So this is really focused on kind of security door improvements, cameras, secure entries, accessibility, elevators, things like that. So safety, security, and access for all. And then site logistics and traffic. Again, making sure we're getting kids safely to school, getting parents drop off, as well as when they get in that building to make sure they feel safe until they go home. And then finally, that third bucket is those learning environment improvements. So this is, as we talk about planning priorities 3 through 7, that's really about how do we improve the experience and the opportunities for students and staff to continue to grow and provide it as education continues to change over time. So we've then categorized those into 2 things: technology improvements. As we've gone through there, not to say that there's not smaller technology things that need to be happen that maybe fall under more of that maintenance piece, but the main focus here in those technology improvements really is about classroom technology, bringing that up, giving equal access, making sure that's consistent and able to be upgraded over time. And then that second one is the learning environment improvements. And this is kind of where all of those different opportunities and things start to fall in. So these are kind of more the, less about going in and replacing or maintaining things. This is truly about maybe changing how you're delivering instruction or providing additional opportunities for kids, whether that's science, the Learning Commons or Media Center, special education spaces, performing arts, athletics, kind of that whole gamut to continue to elevate those experiences for students there. So we'll talk about that list a little bit more here in a second, but those were kind of the ones that kind of rose to the top of current needs here. Oops, so we'll jump right in there. So with that, as you guys saw in this report as well, how we try and do this is obviously, typically with any district we work with, there's always more needs than we can support at any given time. And the goal of this facility master plan truly is to prioritize and start to kind of phase that out so that you can take on some of that over time and do it in a smart and proactive way. So how we've done this is, you saw in those reports, anything identified as red is kind of an immediate need, something that we've determined probably needs to be addressed in that 0 to 3 years. The yellow is identifying kind of more the immediate, the near future needs. So the yellow there is kind of that 3 to 5 or beyond, not something we need to do now, but we want to keep that on our mind, make sure that we're planning for those improvements to stay ahead of them. So these numbers do start, you guys have a lot of buildings, so these numbers do start to add up pretty quickly in today's dollars. So from this report, we identified about $275 million in overall needs. The red immediate need category was about 121 million, and then that yellow was about 154. So one thing to note, and we're gonna jump forward here in a second, but these are the initial costs based on today's dollars. Obviously, we all know things continue to get more expensive over time, inflation escalation. Good news is things have slowed. We are not seeing the 10, 12, 15% inflation a year that we were seeing in 2020 and beyond. Obviously, we only can, project out the next few years. Something else happens that we can't project, but the good news is that slowed a little bit. We're currently seeing in the market construction industry about 1 to 1.25% a quarter, or 5% a year, which is honestly more back to kind of pre-COVID, pre-2020 typical that you would see on a regular basis that we could plan for pretty accurately. So that is good news for the near short term. So based on that though, we typically see a facility master plan that it takes some time to implement. Obviously, if we were to adopt a plan tonight, still got to go again to prioritize, make sure we've got funding for that, get projects going, get things ordered. So we typically say it takes a year to 2 years to really implement that first phase. So based on that, we are going to start to escalate out costs, because again, we don't want to plan for today's dollars, not do the work tomorrow, and then already be kind of chasing our tail to get caught up or cut scope at that point. So we really want to project out, try and be appropriately conservative. Again, not too conservative, because we don't want to, spend more dollars than we need to or plan for that, so we can prioritize appropriately. So this is a slide that we like to share just as kind of a big picture frame of reference. So talking about $275 million in needs today, 2025. As I mentioned, we said 1 to 2 years typically before implementation. So we are looking out kind of for a point of reference moving forward as 2027. Could be sooner, could be later, but just as kind of a starting point for discussions here tonight. As I mentioned, that 5% a year, so if we escalate out essentially 2 years from today, so to the third quarter, almost fourth quarter of 27, that adds $28 million. If we were just to do the work that we identified in those buckets today, and then if we escalate that out another 5 years to 2032, that adds another $76 million. So just, those numbers add up pretty quickly. So this is just a good thing to, a reminder of the more we can get ahead of those phased implementation and proactive approach, long-term can save up the district dollars. So as I mentioned, we want to talk moving forward in 2027 dollars for today, just to make sure that we're understanding that magnitude. So what you can see up here, and you also have a copy in front of you, is each of those buckets escalated out, both the red and yellow columns, to 2027. So as I mentioned, that 275 becomes 303 million. That red column becomes 134 million in immediate needs and 169 million in future needs. So with all of that, those lines, let me go back real quick. So each of those lines you see as we talked about kind of those bigger buckets, because this is a lot. So we wanted to kind of try and balance how much detail we went into tonight. But you see all those categories we just talked about in those buckets line out through these. We're gonna focus a little bit more on those learning environment upgrades because those are ones that maybe have a little bit different impact. And we know maybe might have some more discussion points tonight. But before we do that, as I mentioned, usually 1 to 2 years kind of before a phase of a master plan can truly be implemented by a district. So do want to talk about that timeline a little bit more for some future opportunities. So again, we're obviously in 2025. We're looking at discussions tonight and then potential adoption of a master plan here in the next few months, pending conversations tonight and future board meetings. So what we're showing on here is kind of that first implementation of a phase 1. Typically what we see is when we identify those needs, we kind of start to phase that out. We look at about a 10-year outlook. So kind of that's why we were showing that escalation 5 years out from 27. If you start to break that down a little bit into some manageable pieces. So one potential scenario would be implementing that first phase starting in 2027, could align with potential bond issue. Obviously that would require determining those funding sources and priorities. I know you guys got some of that information last month in terms of what the debt management options might be there. And I think those numbers also align with 2027. Another reason we wanted to kind of start there as a discussion point. And then, as we mentioned, kind of looking at that 5-year for each phase. So first phase, 27 to 32, second phase, 32 to 37. And then as we mentioned, we typically recommend that districts do a quick review of the master plan yearly and then major updates every 5 to 10 years, depending on, again, if you have a huge swing in projections, might warrant it sooner. If it's kind of staying the course or continuing to decline, that might allow you to hold off and do that a little bit longer. But that would put you about 2035 for a major update in 10 years that then would again start that cycle of additional phases, needs change over time. So trying to balance that with recommendations there. So with that, as we've talked about tonight, we identified about $134 million in 2027 dollars of immediate needs in those red. So that falls into all of those ongoing maintenance projects, safety and security improvements, as well as some of those learning environment upgrades. From the conversations on the debt management service last month, and in terms of a potential for 2027 bonding capacity, including that debt service transfer that you guys talked about, the cap was about $150 million for 2027. So we obviously looked at an option. One would be just addressing those immediate needs, which is that $134 million, and then also started to look at what additional priorities based on what we talked about tonight might layer in there to get kind of to that cap. That, again, these are just 2 scenarios that wanted to start the discussions on this evening. The other thing about that is, and it actually plays out pretty nicely, we talked about alignment through all of this, that if you start to break out that about $303 million that was identified over the next 10 years, that does split up from 2 phases to about $150 million each. Again, trying to make sure it's a manageable amount to get done in 3 to 5 years. So that was kind of where we looked at that option 2 to kind of split up that amount of needs throughout 2 phases. So with that, obviously, 18 million is the, sorry, my math, sorry, 14 million is kind of that difference between those 2 options that we presented. And you guys do have this sheet in front of there. So for all of the ongoing maintenance projects, safety security projects, those stay consistent between both options. Where the real difference starts to play out, and that $14 million is in that learning environment section that we're zooming in on here. Just for your guys' frame of reference as well, each of those gray lines up there under each of the blue ones, site drainage, paving, site lighting, all those sort of things, roofs, doors, that gets expanded much more in the background, and that is broken down from our assessments by building. So that's a lot to go through. So we do have that information and can definitely share that. It does align with what you guys saw in here. So wasn't going to go through that in detail tonight, but did kind of want to focus in on the learning environment upgrades. Obviously, that first piece, technology, as you go into classrooms, update the classroom technology, there's a lot behind the scenes, kind of backbone, things like that, that also play into that. So that would be devices, screens, things like that, along with the infrastructure for that. And then as we start to go into those renovation learning environment upgrades, focus here was really on some of those specialty programs and spaces, also trying to look at hitting all of the learning levels from elementary school through high school. First couple items up there would be a CTE expansion and or improvements. Obviously, big emphasis right now on continuing to support students where they're at and look at different opportunities for post-graduation opportunities. So that was identified there as some potential improvements or renovations there. High school performing arts, obviously the last bond has improved the actual performing arts auditorium spaces. So this is really more about the non-auditorium spaces, music rooms, band rooms, those sort of spaces. High school athletics, the baseball, softball, turf improvements. Francis Howell Central obviously had baseball, softball, turf this year. That gives the district different flexibility with weather and things and scheduling. So that would be bringing that parity to Francis Howell North and High. Those were some things that were on here at one point that you see zeroed out there right now, just from where we are seeing at that cap. So those were some that were identified that are not currently on that list, but could potentially be looked at from capital and things like that. As we go through there, some locker room, weight room renovations for middle school and high school, science classrooms at middle school and high school, and then media center, learning library renovations at all learning levels, and then some dollars for continued special education improvements, knowing that those needs continue to evolve over time. Okay, so that's a lot of information.
I've got a quick question
Yeah,
just to clarify. So on those white spaces that didn't have any dollar values, did you say that that was just to stay under that 150 or so? Like,
Yeah, so those were
those were the least critical of the criticals.
Those were initially in the yellow category.
Okay.
So they were not, none of those were, let me go back here real quick, sorry. So as you can see off to the right, the ones that are white and show a 0 on there under the learning environments, those were yellow on the larger list of that 150 million. But as we are starting to pull things over from those yellows, the two that you can, let me zoom it back here again, sorry. The two that got pulled over from the yellow category, the kind of near future, were the locker room improvements and the high school casework. So those couple other ones are still in that yellow category for a phase 2, but currently aren't there. So those are all obviously up for conversation. This is just kind of that starting point based on the priorities we heard, since there's a lot out there.
Thanks.
Great question.
You want to pause for questions right now?
Yeah, so if we want to go to questions, I think really the next slide that we have really is just kind of talking next steps. So,
Board, any questions?
We're just trying to figure out why locker rooms cost so much.
Yeah, that's important. So one thing, for anybody who's watching us online, one thing just maybe call attention to, it was shared at the October board meeting. We have about 2.9 million square feet of property as part of the part of the district. You start imagining each of your houses, however many square feet you have, how much renovations required, how many heating and cooling, all those are costs. Maybe that helps us out, have a picture of what it looks like to manage 2.9 million square feet of property. And so that's just one thing I just want to name out loud for anybody who's maybe listening online, is that we have to be a steward of 2.9 million square feet of property, and what you're presenting are ways that we can be a steward of that, not for fluff or to be fantastic or sparkly, but by any means, it's just a way to steward the properties that we already have. I have a question. What is our current budget that we use for capital expenses? Annual budget?
Yeah, so it varies year to year. If you recall, the year that I started in 2023, our annual capital budget was less than about $2.5 million. And working with new leaders in the system, we were able to reprioritize and budget a little bit differently. to support technology lease purchases, as well as technology items, and then just the needs that you're starting to see here that we're making a lot of progress in. We were able to raise that to roughly about, all in, I think about 9 million. That's not just operations, that also factors the technology lease purchases, at times bus purchases as well, because those are all capitalized items.
So the $9 million capital budget, that would be attacking some of these issues right here, right? So without approving any bond issue, the capital budget could address some of these, but what I'm hearing is that there is an overwhelming amount of need that a $9 million a year budget towards capital expenses will not be able to cover.
That's correct. It's really not sustainable from a long term. When you look at even just the 0 to 3 year priority, it would take us a long time just through the capital budget to address that. And just as a reminder, that also can change depending on what is happening with legislation, because the capital budget is actually built from a transfer from the operating budget, and there may be years that we may need to do less of a transfer into the capital budget to be able to meet these needs. The other thing that you
I would just
also...
say, we have currently slated $5 million per year from the operating budget to help to take care of just the ongoing maintenance cost.
And President Blair, you brought up another good point, just in terms of the square feet that we maintain on a daily basis. But the other thing to keep in mind is, on a daily average, we just foot traffic in the district, people driving on our pavement, this is collectively district-wide, we average anywhere from 19 to 20,000 people when you really factor in students, visitors, our community patrons. And so that's all that traffic. You have doors opening and closing, you have people driving on pavement, you have people walking on carpet, on floors, and all of those have a life cycle. So just try to imagine if on a daily basis in your home you have, I'll just use 100 people that visit you and walk all over your carpet, or swinging your door open and shut, your garage door going up and down. That's just wear and tear on the district's infrastructure. And that's not even factoring in any facility rentals that take place within the district.
Thank you. Board, other questions? Okay, so next step.
Okay, so next steps, so if there's any comments or questions or any feedback in terms of those options, we can definitely take that back and explore other options there. The other thing we want to do is, I know there was a question on one of the dollar amounts there too, so especially specific to some of the learning environment upgrades, we've provided some additional budget numbers that we do want to go back and validate a little bit further. Obviously, having correct budgets is really critical to finding that fine line of how much do we need to take on in this next phase, and trying to get as much work done in as little budget as possible to be efficient with district dollars. So we do want to take one more pass over this to make sure that everything is aligned with what the needs truly are, that we don't have any additional scope in there that maybe doesn't need to happen, just so that we can try and trim that down to what we do. So typically we start with these rough budgets here. We'll do one more pass through that to see if there's anything that we could pull out of there and still execute these projects and needs efficiently before we came back kind of with an update and final recommendations to the board in terms of different options to implement that first phase specifically.
Board, are there any questions about that timetable?
I just have a question too, when we talk about funding options. Is that going to be part of that conversation for how we would approach $148 million of the work? Yeah.
You are welcome to have those conversations right now. However, you feel that you would want to have those conversations, or we could do it at a different time. But yeah, it's now you know the price tag, so the kind of.
I'm just trying to reconcile if we have $5 million available for maintenance, you know, in our operating budget to help for capital planning, and then we've got another several million just for capital improvement projects. That's a drop in the bucket about what we're facing for like pretty urgent needs over the next 3 years, so.
So, yeah, if I can, and let me know if this is the same path that you're going. We're not making any we're not making any decisions today regarding pursuing anything, any ballot issues, but that's not what today's about. This is about one more step of informing us, letting the board represent the community by having all the information presented to us. And so we want to thank you for functioning that way. And so we are receiving that information. There'll be discussions and conversations as we continue to learn more. One thing that might be helpful while we're all here, and whoever else is watching as well, if you could share what is the mechanism of a no tax increase like bond for those who are learning, for those who hear this and they start to clinch up a little bit. Just maybe share briefly what a no tax increase bond is, and whether or not that is one of the options for us to be at least aware of or thinking about in the next upcoming years.
Do you have me? Go ahead. Me?
We'll defer to Dr. Sanders.
I feel like we're like doing, I feel like it was like rock, paper, scissors on that one for some reason. I'll kind of explain it in like home budget terms. So the pennies that are allocated in the levy that are for debt service, you start to pay off your debt and you start to spend those down. And so you have a capacity still left in that tank. And so what you can do is you can go back to your voters and say, hey, can we keep this at that level and use it for these projects? So in essence, a list that would look like this. So some of those would be for our deferred maintenance, some of those would be to help with our safety and security, and some of those would be to continue on that strategic plan. I think of the areas of the high school CTE expansion of programs and that. So it would help with modernizing more culinary arts kitchens and modernizing the band room and et cetera, fine arts. So that's in essence what you're doing with a no tax bond increase. And when Brent came last month, he was really just letting us know kind of where that was at. If we move some of those pennies over into the operating budget, which is what the debt service levy does, it takes it out of this pocket and puts it into this pocket, and it can then pay for operating cost. Whereas when it's living in the debt service, it literally lives in a separate bank account. You can't do anything else with that money except for pay down your debt. And so both can happen. So we will have enough by that point. That's what Brent was explaining, where you could move some of those pennies over, help the operating budget. You want to do that in a year that is an odd numbered year because that's when you have a reassessment. So it maximizes that calculation. And just the numbers he ran for us the other day, the district would, in the the assumptions that were made, it would be an additional $264,000 that would be available on the operating side. All the while, we would have the bonding capacity of the no tax increase that I just mentioned, because there's still enough room in the tank in order to go for this list of projects that we just talked about. Did I miss anything? Okay.
To also add to it, I think as we review and look at the district strategic plan, I think one of the things that under Pillar 3 is just specifically how we allocate resources to be able to support district operations, right? And I think historically, if you look at our district, we tend or have behaved in a way where we have ran bond issues every really about 10 to 12 years. With inflation and cost of just doing business, when you look at that, you have to take a lot larger chunk, to be able to finance those projects. So by strategically putting a plan together as we're presenting to you guys this evening for consideration and discussion, by taking an approach where you take smaller bites and systematically maintain your systems, it really in the long term is going to put the district in a situation where they're better off financially. I can tell you a number of stories if you look across the country where districts have sat and maybe not run any type of bond issue for 25 to 40 to 60 years, and they're looking at referendums in the billions, right? And so by being able to, and deferred maintenance, and they're really in a position where they're never going to catch up. So this is really, as we look at how the district allocates resources, this is a better pathway to be able to systematically address our physical assets. As you've heard, the only lever we really have to address that on a wide scale basis from a district standpoint is through really bond referendums. While we have capital dollars, that's just a drop in the bucket in terms of the transfer that we make annually to be able to support the physical asset needs.
So you're saying we would have more than 150?
What I'm saying is just systematically, I think the board heard from Piper Sandler in terms of the menu of options. If the board chooses to go out in 2027 and do a levy transfer, from a bonding capacity, we were at 150 million, and then in the next cycle was 2032 was another 150 million, and then the later we got out on, based off of their presentation, the capacity grew. Not saying our needs are going to be that at that point in time, but being able to really systematically take a look and try to address things in a smaller window. Really
So it's not
4 or 5
dangerous
years.
to go for 148 when we think 150 is our max? Or,
Well, that'll be for the board to, to really decide through, what they have an appetite for. What we're saying is these needs here in the 0 to 3 years total that.
And those numbers would get recalculated again, because there's assumptions that are built into the amortization table that he provided. But if the board chooses to say we're moving towards that as a plan, even at that, all of the enrollment numbers that we talked about would get recalculated. All of the cost numbers would get recalculated. All of the bonding capacity gets recalculated all the way up into that time, because variables can change. But yeah, it just gives you a scope of understanding today what's available.
So what do we do between now and if we're talking about 2027 is when they're suggesting this would go, so like, is that like in April 2027?
Correct. Right. So for their purposes, we'll continue the process. They'll come back in December and we'll finalize what we know to be the facility master plan that puts us into motion. And as a part of that, we would say we would want to run a bond issue, no tax bond increase in April of 2027, and the debt service levy transfer at the same time. So we would want to have both of those on the ballot, 2 separate pieces, and explain them accordingly. So
that puts us into 2027 to 2028 by the time we're actually
correct.
working on this stuff. That puts us already into that end of that 0 to 3 years, yeah.
Yeah, and that's correct. I do also want to remind the board that annually, obviously with the aggressive transfer that we're currently doing, because we're in a position to do it from operating over to capital, we're looking at this annually, and we're going around right now and visiting with building leaders and discussing these needs, and we're trying to prioritize with what we can do through capital.
Thank you.
I like calling out things that have been presented to us and just renaming them. When we talk about the strategic plan, it's about, again, focusing our attention in a certain focused way. And one of our vision statements is to be fiscally sound with a track record of smart long-term planning. And then also, this has been communicated to the community for months now. It includes process improvement that names complete a long-range demographic study and facilities master plan to inform capital expenditure needs. And we're following right along with it. So when people are paying attention to what we do at a board meeting, we say we're going to do something and then we do it. And I want to thank you, our interim superintendent, Mark Delaney, for continuing to keep us on target, to say that these are the things that are our priorities and to make sure they are coming through into fruition on schedule. So thank you for your leadership to be able to keep this on target.
I appreciate that, and I would also say I'm very fortunate to have an amazing team of people that surround me every day that keep me working in that direction as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Board, do you have any more questions?
Yeah, I do. Do we have any idea? I know you covered very thoroughly the building capacity and things like that, but what's not clear to me is our overall projection for enrollments moving forward. How do we see that over 5 to 7 years? Going up, going down? Any projections like that?
Yeah,
Not
I
just at the
didn't
building
bring it.
level, overall district.
I didn't bring it with me, but overall, if you recall, when demo advisors shared, overall, I think we're going to see about a 1% decline over the next 10 years.
Yep.
And that was connected to demographics, not due to other factors, due to birth rate, age of the county.
Yep.
Those are the main factors.
Right.
So 1% is decreased from 17,000.
Yeah,
Correct.
Not very much.
not very much.
Yeah.
But again, just remember, we take a look at that annually, right? But also, through process improvement, the plan is to look at a demographic study as well as a facility master plan about every 5 years to ensure that what we're seeing from a trend standpoint, take a deeper dive, is true and holding. As what's been mentioned, the farther out you go, the less reliable that some of that data is.
Anything else, board? Anything else, Mr. Mark Delaney, you want to share anything else before we leave?
No, I just want to thank Hollis and Miller. We appreciate all the work that you guys do and being a valuable partner, helping us project and plan this far out, and and especially appreciate the lens on the specific projects, the feedback that you got from our staff. All very important as we lay out a plan, that we make sure that the people that are in the spaces are comfortable with the decisions that are being made as well as our community patrons. And just want to thank you all for that work. We really appreciate your support.
Thank you. Anything else you want to say before we conclude?
I don't think so. Thank you guys for
I do
your time
want to say
tonight.
one thing. I do want to say, I got a concern, I just wanted to, at the very micro level, I had a concern about the entrance to Hollenbeck Central and transportation, that's hard to get into, that it's very rough, and so I'd just like to give you some a chance to address that.
No, thank you, and it's on the list. That is one site, in addition to the pavement improvements. We basically have one way in and one way out for what I would consider 5 district operations. You have transportation, you have Hollenbeck, you have early childhood central, you have Central Elementary, and that entire campus really needs to be reworked. And I recognize that quite a bit of the asphalt is in poor condition right now, but with not knowing when the board would choose to run a ballot measure for a bond, we need to comprehensively address that. And if we were to do any kind of work now, we're going to end up potentially coming back and having to redo work. And so we're trying to be mindful and thoughtful and strategic about how we approach that. It's on the list right now. We're just really repairing it to the best we can. But the subgrade underneath that entire asphalt parking surface is really deteriorating and needs to be completely torn out.
Is it due to life cycle, or is it due to abuse?
A little bit of both. It's life cycle, but also the soil conditions on that campus are different, for lack of better terms. I know, just as the board-approved project for the transportation facility, we had to remediate a lot of the soils in that parking area to be able to stabilize it, and I think it's just it's a byproduct of soil conditions there as well.
So that falls underneath safety and security, site logistics, traffic improvements. That category, it's actually about half of that number that falls in there for that campus.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to say one more thing. Thank you all very much for coming in for a work session. The team intends for this to be a conversation that's an ongoing conversation, and not feeling an immediacy, not feeling to be rushed to decision. When you think about the projections for that demographic study, that's to the year 2034-35. Those are our current 3rd graders, year of graduation. So the decisions you make today are really legacy decisions for us to think bigger about the district far past the time that we will all be here. And so again, I just want to say thank you, not to get sappy, but you came in on an extra night. You all came from far away to see us, and we just appreciate the hard work that it takes to get to this point. For the things that are going to last in the district for a long time.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you to John Waynick, Megan Barnes, and Justin Durham from Howell Miller. Appreciate it. Is that it?
Nope, and I look forward to providing our quarterly construction and bond update at the November board meeting. So the positive thing is quite a few of those projects. We turned over the wrestling facility to the building this week. Anderson, the gym's been turned over. So a lot of really exciting things for the community, and the board really fulfilling the commitments that weren't able to really be fulfilled just due to costs through a previous bond issue. And I'm excited to present that update to the board and the community at the next board business meeting. So, thank you.
Okay. We do not have to do any special motion to close, all that stuff. So we'll just say thank you all for being here and good night.
Thank you.
Yes, it's all yours. Yes, even the large copies so we can all see them.
We don't know. We'll go away with it.